Would you like to see some awesome home automation done so well that even the most hardened geek would weep at the sheer beauty of it? Then you should definitely subscribe to Cameron Gray's channel. He does some excellent work over there. If, however, you'd like to see something a bit rough around the edges but which gets the job done, stick around. One topic Cameron hasn't covered yet is automated blinds. I sent him an email and he said he might well be doing it at some point, but having relatively recently moved into his new house, he still has windows that don't have blinds or curtains at all, so it's hard to justify spending money on the automated ones, which is absolutely fair enough. So having drawn a blank there, and struggled to find any other UK-centric content about this, I had to dig into it myself. So sit back, get yourself a bottle of Welsh gin and a bowl of haggis, and welcome to David Makes It Up. Part 1. Background. So let's consider the humble window blind and why I hate it. I should start by saying that this house isn't a new build. It was built in 1967, which makes it 21 years older than me, and the previous owners fitted every room out with a couple of blinds, 1 and 2. So what's wrong with these then? Well, first of all, they have these unsightly cords flapping around everywhere. You can see here that on this double-blinded window, you've got one there for moving the inner blind and for tilting the slats, and then you've got another one for this roller blind. And of course, these cords are, as well as being unsightly, they're dangerous to small children. Now, of course, they are fitted, they usually come supplied with these clips to hold them back against the wall to reduce the danger. And as you can see here, nobody in the real world bothers to fit them, although you'd think you'd either screw that to the wall or take it off, not just leave it dangling there to provide evidence of how you couldn't be stuffed. And another fun bonus about these things is that if you have the windows open on a summer's day, this weight that holds the strings in place will scrape across the paint and rub a big gouge in it, so that's fun. And lastly, of course, I'm lazy. Wouldn't it be nice if the blinds open themselves in the morning and close themselves at dusk? Part 2. What's the plan? It's not hard to imagine a technology that motorises a window blind. After all, surely it's a smaller and simpler version of the technology that allows this garage door to move up and down using a motor. The dominant player in the motorised blind world appears to be a manufacturer called Somfy, who've existed for quite a while, and they're European, and they make motorised gates, blinds, garage doors, and all sorts. And although I can't find a motorised Venetian blind with vertical slats, what I can find is a motorised aluminium blind which can be raised, lowered, and it's also possible to tilt the slats to your desired angle to deal with the sunlight coming in or not, depending on the time of day. So that's all pretty promising, and the question then becomes, well, what UK suppliers do we have who'll sell these things? So the best value source I found was this shop based in Brighton, theblindshop.com. It's possible to have blinds that only tilt or only lift. I don't know why you wouldn't want both if you're spending the money. So I ordered my 2 from here, and it took them a couple of weeks to get them manufactured and shipped to me, but they made them to exactly the right measurements, and when they arrived, they were all in good shape. Part 3. Automation. So I'm not going to dwell too much on the mechanics of actually fitting the blinds. You need a drill, you need to know what you're doing, and when you're measuring up for blinds, one top tip that I would give above all others is don't assume that your window recess is the same width at the top and the bottom, especially in an older house. And if you're fitting something to a full height window recess that goes all the way down to the floor, don't forget that the skirting board might go into your window recess and mean that it's definitely not the same size at the bottom as it is at the top. Getting them installed wasn't too bad. One important thing to remember is that you need to pair the remote controls to the blinds before you install them, because the pairing button is on the top of the motor, which is housed in the top of the blind and is quite difficult to access once you've got them up. What you can't see behind me, but I might splice some footage in for you, is that these are battery powered. So if you were in a nice new build house where everything was made out of plasterboard, you might be able to get a mains supply, a mains powered spur to your window recess, and then have a 12-volt driver hidden in it. For those of us with older houses with completely solid walls everywhere, it's never going to happen. So having the ability to run these off a 12-volt battery pack is exactly what you want. And if you mount it carefully, you can hide the battery pack behind the blind where no one will see it. I've had mine in place for, I think, a solid 6 months now, and they've been in daily use during that time, and they haven't yet run out and needed the battery packs recharging. Obviously, you do get a charger to do that with, and it's just a 12-volt supply with a little plug on the end that fits into the battery pack. So no doubt that will come sooner or later, but certainly you get enough life out of them that it isn't annoying me. So I've got these in place, but the question then becomes, how do I automate them? And if we take a look at the manufacturer's website, we can find a few possibilities straight away. There's a robustly priced option here for integrating with the Amazon Echo smart home system, among other things. Now, in fairness to Somfy, I've got to say, there's no monthly subscription element to this like there is with so many things these days, so that upfront cost has got to cover the existence of software, servers, and a team of people to keep them going. Not necessarily a very big team, given that once this is written, it's presumably something you just don't mess with, but there's a certain amount of ongoing cost bundled into your upfront payment there. Now, if you dig a bit deeper, there is a sort of junior version of this that's perfectly fine for most people and is a heck of a lot cheaper, so that looks a bit more attractive. But again, having spent £200 to £300 on each blind, it's hard to justify. You know, if you're fitting out a conservatory for some footballer who's got a bottomless budget, I'm sure the extra £300 wouldn't be a problem. If you're doing that, you might want to buy yourself one of these, which is the truly Rolls-Royce option, and you can integrate that with whatever you want, mate. But for those of us out in the real world, is there an option that doesn't involve taking out a second mortgage? Well, yes, and this is where Somfy, having been around and being so ubiquitous, is handy, because if you have a look online, you quickly find that someone on the internet has done the work. So at this point, a big old shout out to R. Strauss. I couldn't find out what the R stood for. He doesn't seem to be active on GitHub anymore, but he obviously put quite a lot of time and effort into this project back in the day, and it's exactly what I was looking for. And indeed, the existence of this option was a big reason why I bought into the Somfy blinds in the first place. So, in order to get in on his plan, I had to spend £12 on AliExpress and wait a couple of weeks. And what I was waiting a couple of weeks for was this collection of parts here. So the 3D printed case is courtesy of Michael, so shout out if you're watching. And what we have in here, I'll hold that up to the camera so you can see it. This is an ESP32 based home automation board. These are generic connectors, and this is just a radio aerial and a little circuit board to drive it. I bought exactly what he recommended. It took me about 5 minutes sitting on my sofa to bolt all the parts together. Oh, and I should say the other end of that USB lead there, that's just power. So it's not being fed from a computer. This little box is standalone. It talks Wi-Fi, and once it's up and running, you just use its web interface or its API, so it's totally self-contained. And I was really surprised and pleased by how easy it is to flash the software that he's produced onto these boards. So you have to install a Windows driver to talk to these boards at all. But once you've installed that, the whole process is triggered from within your browser. It takes a couple of minutes, and then you just reboot this, and in the classic fashion, it broadcasts a Wi-Fi network. You join it, you give it the details to actually hop on your Wi-Fi network of choice, and then everything else is handled through the web interface. So let's jump over and take a look at that now. So here we are at the web interface of my installed device. This is designed to work really nicely on mobile, incidentally, but there's no reason you can't use it for an ordinary browser as well. And he's put really quite a lot of thought into this. So you can see there that it knows the location of each of the blinds. You can see these little pictures showing them that they are both fully closed. But if I grab the remote and hit the open button on my office blind, and you might hear the motor start to go in the background, then you watch the little picture there and you can see it's animating the business of the office blind opening. And if I hit the stop button, I'm not going to bother cutting across, but you can take my word for it that it is about 2/3 shut, 1/3 open, as depicted. And if I hit the close button, it's on its way back south, and as it reaches the bottom, the picture will match that. So there's a couple of things being illustrated here. First of all, it's not just the case that you can send open and close commands from this software. It also listens to the remote controls, so you can still use the physical remotes to move things, which is brilliant if you have other civilians, if you like, staying in your house, wandering around, wanting to just use the normal controls, because this thing still knows what position the blinds are in, even if you've used the ordinary remote control to move them. So the way that works is that you pair the remote control with this device. You leave it paired to the blind, but you also pair it with this device so it can just listen and it can hear the remotes issuing commands, and it can adjust its own state to reflect that. Obviously, this thing also has controls of its own, so if I hit the up button on my office blind there, and there's just a momentary delay whilst the radio broadcast happens, but again, I'm not sure if you can actually hear the motor being picked up in the background on my microphone, but I can assure you that the office blind is in fact moving. And if I hit the stop button, it stops about halfway open, and then I can go back down until she closes. Now, the one thing I haven't been able to figure out on this is the tilt. The tilt percentages that are shown on here are wrong, and when I do tilts with the remote control, it registers the blinds as going up or down. I think possibly the developer of all this, he built it primarily to work with the with some patio shades, patio awnings that were motorised by Somfy. I don't think he had physical possession of a RTS tilt and up and down blind, so I think he was probably developing those bits blind, if you'll pardon the expression. So the interface very much makes it look, in fact I'll show you, the interface very much makes it look as though you can indeed select what you've got in terms of this being a blind, and you can configure the time it takes to tilt the slats fully and the time it takes to raise and lower. You have to time those yourself with a stopwatch so it gets the state right. But yeah, I can't quite work out how to get it to do the tilting thing. Actually, though, it doesn't really matter in practice, because I'm quite happy to do the tilting with my remote control, and although when you tilt it with the remote, this thing can register that as going up or down when it's not, because you sort of long press the remote and I think it registers that just as the up or down signal. It doesn't quite work, but it doesn't matter is what I'm trying to say. In reality, you can tilt with the remote on the rare occasions you want to, if you're trying to get some afternoon sun without it shining directly on your computer screen or in your eyes. But as long as you leave it in an obvious state at the end of your session, then in practice, when this thing comes along later in the day with an automated command to raise it or lower it, chances are you'll be absolutely fine. I haven't found it a practical problem. At some point, I would like to get Claude Code to pull the code apart and see if it can work out what's going on, but it's really not that much of a priority. Again, I'm not going to show you all of this. It is pretty easy to work out. I didn't have too many problems with it. One thing that I think is worth saying is that you'll be wanting to increase the RX bandwidth setting here, I found the same thing as someone who reported a bug on GitHub against this project. Unless you increase the receiving bandwidth, you may find that one remote control works fine and the other one just isn't registered by this device, despite them being physically identical. I'd actually bought a third microphone off eBay before I realised that. Don't turn the transmit power up any higher than 10 dBm, or it'll probably, on most hardware, scramble the signal so badly that they don't work. I did discover while playing around with these settings that sadly I can't go and put the little transmitter in the garage in the server rack with all of its friends, because it just doesn't quite have the grunt to transmit through the solid brick and block outer wall of the house, or at least it can't pick up the remotes from out there. That's not a huge surprise. It's exactly the same category as the Zigbee based hub for my Hive active heating, and I have a secondary network location which is just a cupboard on my landing that I can stick things in. And this little box has been in a cupboard on my landing and doing its thing for some months. I haven't actually got around to installing the Home Assistant integration, primarily just because I haven't got Home Assistant, and it is overdue to consolidate all the kind of fragmented, handcrafted lash-ups that constitute my home automation, but I just haven't quite got there yet. So when I do, I've no doubt the Home Assistant integration will work. Like, that's not the hard part. For now, what I've got is just a cron job on my Raspberry Pi that opens the blinds at 7 AM and closes them at 6:30 PM. Obviously, you really want it to be opening and closing at, certainly the closing I want to be at sunset, which is of course a movable thing. Home Assistant eats that kind of integration for breakfast, because you can tell it your location, it can know what sunrise and sunset are, and that's the whole point of it, is it can do integrations like that. But for now, this is really nice, and it's been running after fiddling with those settings, including, as say, the receiving bandwidth and locating it properly. This has been rock solid. It has never missed a beat. I have never once come down in the morning and found my kitchen blind still closed, or come home at night and found it still open. It is just bulletproof, it works, and it costs 12 quid. And I think that's fantastic. So I'd like to end this video with a huge shout out to R. Strauss, whoever you are. Thank you for your open source contributions. Maybe one day I'll do you a pull request that sorts out whatever's not quite right with that tilting. I'll just show you actually while I'm here, folks, that you can look at the log here, and if I hit one of the buttons on my remote control, the up button specifically, then that's the sound of a blind opening behind me. I can hit the middle button to stop, and then the down button to come back down. And you can see you can have a log here of the remote control events. The signal strength is good, but then it darn well ought to be, because the thing is on the desk right next to where I am. But I think for now it's time to pop the transmitter back in the cupboard where it lives and wrap this video up. Thank you very much for watching.